There are situations in life when a person needs to limit himself in something, give up something for an indefinite period, and how long it will last is unknown. Unfortunately, many people do not like to deny themselves something and are ready to do the most terrible things, just not to limit themselves from what they are so used to. Which pain was worse, the heart attack or the heartbreak? All of Brad Carson's friends believed he led a charmed life. His business was successful, and his employees felt lucky to work for him. His stunning wife was not only beautiful, but also intelligent, happy, and well-liked in the community, devoted to her husband. They took pride in their 3 children, 2 of whom had already graduated from university. Everyone was healthy and greeted each day with enthusiasm. Brad's greatest love was his wife, Molly. She was a tall, dark-haired beauty with a smile that could outshine the sun. But it was in the evenings, when the lights were dimmed, that Brad truly appreciated Molly's beauty. Despite what her driver's license said, her 50-year-old body defied aging. Even after the birth of 3 children, she was a pleasure to look at. They met at a hospital charity event, raising funds for a new children's wing. Brad was accompanying his mother to the event since his father had an unexpected trip to meet an out-of-town customer. His father, Carl, had started a small machine shop after leaving the Army following the Korean War. Brad aspired to be an engineer like his father, so he earned a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Florida, near their home in Tampa. Brad hadn't planned to attend the event, but his mother didn't want to go alone and be a third wheel. They were seated at a table, for 8, halfway back from the band. At the same table sat Molly and her date. She was a nurse at Mercy Hospital, and he was a medical supply salesman. For years, she had dreamed of wearing an evening gown, drinking champagne and attending this elite gala. The event was filled with doctors and wealthy business people, exactly where she wanted to be, surrounded by beautiful people. By accepting the salesman's invitation, she finally got the chance to attend. The salesman thought he had hit the jackpot by having a stunning date and access to a free open bar. However, Molly wasn't interested in his advances on the dance floor, so he shifted his attention to the bar. As her date slurred through his 4th or 5th scotch, Molly looked across the table and silently mouthed, "Please dance with me," to Brad. Brad's mother noticed Molly's distress, nudged his ribs, and winked as if saying, "Go for it." Brad immediately stood up and extended his hand to Molly. "Brad, I'm so grateful you rescued me. I knew I shouldn't have come with him, but I've always dreamed of attending this event. It's every girl's dream to dance the night away with a charming man at such a place. I hope you don't mind dancing with me." With a smile, Brad replied, "I'm happy to help make your night memorable. Hopefully, I can be your Prince Charming tonight. If you enjoy yourself, would you be interested in going on a date with me this Saturday?" She raised an eyebrow and said, "I don't have any plans at the moment, but I'd be available if the right guy asked me to a nice dinner, and maybe some dancing." "I may not be the right guy, but I'd really like to take you to dinner and dancing," he responded. They enjoyed several fast and slow dances together before deciding to return to their table for a drink. The drunken salesman had mumbled something about going to the bathroom, but he never returned. Brad's mother remarked, "I think he's gone for the evening. Some of my neighbors are here and ready to leave, so I'll catch a ride home with them. Brad, I assume you'll ensure this lovely nurse gets home on time." With a big smile, Brad replied, "Yes, Mother." He winked at Molly, making her laugh again. Molly led him to a table where her fellow nurses were seated for the rest of the evening. The nurses found it amusing that Molly had exchanged her dull date for a handsome local businessman. This marked the beginning of their relationship, advancing through the stages of kissing, petting, and eventually making love on Saturday nights. Brad couldn't believe his luck. Not only was she fun and intelligent, but she also had all the qualities he wanted in a partner. Like a Ferrari, her body was spectacular and performed exceptionally. She wasn't a virgin, but she also wasn't promiscuous and hadn't been with many others in town. Eventually, it was time for her to meet his parents. Molly had already met Brad's mother. When his father saw her, his eyes sparkled as she gave him a hug. 2 years after graduating and 1 year of courting Molly, they married in Molly's hometown of Fort Lauderdale. 2 years later, they welcomed a son, Jonathan, followed by a daughter, Carrie, and finally another son, Matthew. 30 years after Brad's graduation, Carl was ready to retire. Brad had risen to the position of president of Southeast Manufacturing, a company specializing in aerospace industry manufacturing. Upon his father's retirement, Brad received all the company stock in exchange for paying his father a comfortable monthly consulting fee for the rest of his parents' lives. With his mechanical engineering degree, Jonathan now had a clear path to becoming the next president, third generation, of the family business in 30 years. Molly worked at the hospital until she had 2 children at home. She waited until the youngest, Matthew, was able to get home from school on his own before returning to her nursing career. When the first 2 children were in college and only Matthew was still at home, she realized she didn't like the hospital's demanding hours. She retired, but remained interested in nursing and the hospital. Thanks to Brad's status in the business community and his generous donations to the hospital, Molly was invited to serve on several hospital committees. She loved being around the hospital and reconnecting with her longtime friends who still worked there. Here it was, the American dream. A wife he loved spending every moment with, 3 wonderful kids, a dream home for his wife, financial success, and everyone in the family in good health. That was until Brad and Molly went to play bridge with their neighbors, Ken and Brenda. Brenda and Molly had worked the same nursing shifts when they were new hospital employees and had stayed friends. Ken, a general practice doctor, had allowed Brenda to retire around the same time as Molly. Brad was having a good streak with the cards but didn't notice the growing pain in his chest until he had lost 4 hands. Suddenly, he was unsure which card to play, thinking the stress from work had finally caught up with him. As he reached for the drink in front of him, he felt the pain intensify. He tried to say something to Ken, but no words came out. Ken quickly recognized the issue and rushed to help Brad. Hands were on him asking questions. He heard Brenda shout into her phone, "Heart attack at 1948 Pine Pole Lane. Need an ambulance now?" Brad looked around, confused, thinking, "Who's having a heart attack? It's just the 4 of us. Someone's in serious trouble, and I hope the ambulance arrives soon." He looked up from the floor and saw the other 3 kneeling around him just as the pain in his chest grew worse. "Oh, shit! It's me!" Molly, where are you?" "I'm here, dear. Stay calm, an ambulance is on the way. Ken has called the best cardiologist in town to meet us." For the next week, everything was a blur for Brad. He knew where he was and why. Molly was always there for him. She checked his medical record every time someone made changes to it and, oddly enough, understood all the medical jargon. She was an ideal advocate for the interests of patients. The final medical diagnosis was that Brad had suffered a massive heart attack. If it hadn't been for the 3 medical experts he was playing cards with that evening, he might not have survived. Their quick actions and the subsequent triple bypass surgery promised him a long and healthy life, provided he changed his lifestyle. Molly began to follow Brad's new regime. He needed to rest a lot, avoid emotional stress, leisurely walks around the neighborhood, and no heavy physical exertion. His nurse-wife held his hand, explaining the last item on his not-allowed list for a full recovery. "Darling, we both need to change our bed life for a few months. I'm going to miss the energy and passion that you bring to our lives, but we're going to have to be careful how we feel for a while. You're strong, and you're going to be your old self soon. I love you very much, and I will be there for you when we overcome this ordeal. Our lovemaking will become even more special when you fully recover." Brad understood the new rules. He had friends and business partners who had gone through the same ordeal. Although he didn't like it, the alternative was much worse: to give up intimacy forever and be buried 6 feet deep. The choice was obvious. For the first 4 months, Brad was the perfect patient. He didn't complain, didn't whine, and followed all the rules. Molly played an important role in making Brad healthy and happy again. However, Brad asked, "How is Molly coping with her chastity?" In his absence, she always used adult toys. From the moment of their courtship until their 30th birthday, they were perfect lovers for each other. It was not unusual for them to sweat from the heat of passion. Brad considered it a blessing to have a beautiful wife, and was happy to satisfy her several nights a week. How was she coping with his current physical limitations? Molly was starting to get tired of what she considered slow physical progress, even though it was ahead of the expected recovery time. During the day, she remained cheerful and supportive of Brad. Despite the lack of contact, their tender care for each other persisted. Molly monitored Brad's blood pressure and heart rate to assess his physical abilities. Brad started walking slowly and eventually started walking a mile a day. The goal was to gradually strengthen the heart muscles every week. According to his cardiologist, this allowed him to switch to light bed activity. At the beginning of the 4th month after the attack, Brad recovered enough to start enjoying his intimate life. Gradually, they increased their activity. Molly monitored his blood pressure and heart rate. Although this contributed to Brad's recovery, neither of them really enjoyed the lack of spontaneity and intimacy when all these wires and monitors were attached to him. Turning off the monitor, she looked at him lovingly and said, "Someday, baby. Someday soon." When Brad got better, Molly was able to leave him alone to do business and resume her social activities. One morning, after a good night's sleep, Brad heard the phone ring and Molly answered, "Hi, Carrie." This lifted Brad's spirits, and he enjoyed talking with his lively, cheerful, freedom-loving daughter. He shuffled down the hall and came up to Molly as she was talking. He heard Molly say, "Oh, yes. Your dad is getting better every day. At least that's what the doctors who visit him weekly say. I don't notice it, but he's much better than when we first brought him home." There was silence in the room until Molly spoke again. "Yes, my therapist is really helping me. I am very pleased with the progress. Although it doesn't come close to what your father did. I've never felt this intensity with anyone. That's why I told Eric that I would only need his services until Brad was fully recovered." There was a pause on the other end of the line, after which he continued, "Yes, I understand that he will not be able to meet the requirements immediately, but we will work on his endurance. So maybe I'll ask Eric to do a few on-call sessions instead of my usual 2 times a week. Yes, dear, twice a week. It still happens less often than what I'm used to." Then she told about the unforgettable experience with Eric, how she came to see him and he satisfied her desire. "No, dear, definitely not. Never, under any circumstances, do this to your husband as long as he can satisfy you. I will leave Eric in the blink of an eye as soon as Brad can fulfill my wish." At that moment, Brad couldn't remain standing in the hallway. He had to sit down to prevent himself from collapsing. The woman he loved was with another man. How could she do this? Am I so easily replaceable? His head spun almost as violently as it did during his heart attack. Desperately, he began the breathing exercises his doctor had taught him for stressful situations. Meanwhile, Molly heard Brad stumble into a chair and drop the phone, rushing to his side as quickly as she could. She supported him to prevent him from falling. Brad was consciously taking deep, slow breaths as instructed. With each inhalation, he would fix his gaze on Molly and quietly utter, "Cheater," as he exhaled. In a panic, Molly disconnected the call with Carrie and dialed 911 for an ambulance. Paramedics swiftly arrived, administering oxygen to Brad before transporting him. Molly attempted to accompany Brad in the ambulance, but his vehement reaction prompted the paramedics to advise her to drive herself to the hospital. At the hospital, she faced a similar denial of entry into Brad's room. Hours later, Brad's doctor finally emerged to update Molly. An anxious Molly, nearly having bitten off all her fingernails, blamed herself for triggering another heart attack. "Molly," the doctor said softly, "his condition is stable now. It wasn't caused by a heart attack. It looks like it was some kind of emotional stress. Given his weakened state, the tension became too strong and he blacked out. Whatever it is, it seems to be related to you. He absolutely does not want you in his room this afternoon. Let's discuss this tomorrow. I think he'll be discharged then. Please go home and rest before you end up in my care." With a sad, defeated look, Molly headed for her car. What could have caused this? And then it dawned on her. He must have overheard her talking to Carrie about intimate meetings with Eric. Molly hoped that her relationship with the therapist would remain confidential. After all, their affair was private, just between them. No one else needed to know about her personal life except Carrie, of course. No wonder he lost consciousness. She realized that her husband trusted her completely. He had never doubted her honesty or suspected her of dishonesty or infidelity. He wasn't ready to eavesdrop on Carrie's conversation about her affair with Eric. A few years ago, before she left for Europe for a month, he jokingly mentioned that he would miss her love. She brushed it off by jokingly saying, "Do cardio before I leave, because when I get back, I'll wear you out for a few days." Fortunately, when she returned, she didn't have to lie to him about her affairs with Italian men that month. She wasn't lying, but he never asked either. This was also part of the arrangement for the duration of his illness. The next morning, Brad's friend Dr. Ken arrived to check on him. Ken had spoken with the ER doctor and felt compelled to support Brad. "Hey, Brad. Yesterday was quite a scare. I'm relieved your heart wasn't the main issue, but the stress you experienced could trigger another incident. Would you like me to prescribe some medication to help you relax and avoid getting too worked up?" "Nah, Ken. It wasn't the incident that got to me as much as the sudden bombshell. Now that I know what my undisclosed problem is, I think I can handle it. I appreciate your concern, though, and I might still need to talk to you later. Okay?" "Sure thing, Brad. No problem. I'm heading back to my office. Need a ride home, or is Molly coming?" "No, Molly won't be picking me up," Brad replied, with more bitterness than Ken expected. His doctor friend began to suspect Molly was a significant source of Brad's stress. Ken intentionally avoided any stressful topics on the ride home. He assisted Brad into the house and settled him on the family room couch. He was surprised Molly wasn't there for her husband. Brad didn't mind having a few hours alone before facing his wife. He made a note of things he wanted to discuss with her, saving the core issue for another day. Right now, he just needed to rest and not dive into the impending conflict. When Molly finally arrived, she dropped her groceries and hurried towards Brad. The hurt in his eyes and the pain etched on his face stopped her abruptly, like a fast dog reaching the end of its leash. "Brad, I'm sorry. Shut up. I don't want to hear anything about what you talked about with Carrie. I need to rest, clear my head, and calm down." "But Brad..." "Shut up. Wasn't I clear with you, or are you trying to drive me crazy?" "No, Brad. I'm just relieved you're back home. I want us to have a long life together. I can't imagine life without you. If you love me that much, could you please get me a glass of water? And can you make me dinner? It's already 6 p.m. and I can't stand hospital food." The evening passed quietly as Molly tiptoed around any mention of her suspected infidelity with her clearly upset husband. After 2 hours of watching an uninspiring NFL game, he went to bed. For the first time he could recall, he went to bed without kissing Molly goodnight. He went into the master bedroom and turned off all the alarms, hoping to finally get some sleep. Later, he felt his wife slide into bed next to him. She snuggled up against his back and hugged him with one arm. "Stop it," he said, forcing her to remove her hand from his skin. Sleep was already elusive, and he couldn't stand the way the bed shook when she cried softly. He thought to himself, if she can't accept the new conditions, she can sleep in the guest room. It was 2 days before he spoke again. "Let's talk after breakfast. Do you mind?" After finishing her heart-healthy meal, she anxiously sat down on the edge of the kitchen table, preparing for what would undoubtedly be the most difficult conversation of her life. Brad entered noiselessly, sat down opposite her, and put a notebook and pen on the table. "Molly, I need you to explain to me in your own words what is going on, in connection with what I overheard in your phone conversation with Carrie. I've only heard your version, but it looks like you've been cheating on me for a while. Now I want to hear the whole story, from beginning to end. Do you understand what I'm asking?" A barely audible yes escaped her lips. "Brad, there's something else. We're at a critical point in our relationship, standing on the edge. What you're about to tell me could either heal or harm our marriage. To me, honesty is as crucial as faithfulness. Please don't attempt to deceive or withhold important details under the guise of protecting me. If I discover you've lied or hidden facts about your actions, I'll initiate divorce proceedings immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes. Now I want you to explain everything without interruptions. This is your chance to lay it all out so we can decide our next steps. I'll jot down any questions I have for you afterward. It's your turn to speak." "Brad, I'm deeply sorry you overheard part of my conversation with Carrie. I understand your reaction. What makes it worse is that it occurred at a time when you were making such great progress recovering from your heart attack. Thank you for not kicking me out and giving me the chance to explain where I stand. It's moments like these that remind me why I love you so much. Here's what happened from my perspective. 3 years ago, after a strenuous tennis session, I was in pain with pulled muscles and strained ligaments. Sitting on the sidelines, nearly in tears from the discomfort and my inability to play well, a man about 10 years younger than me approached. He asked if I was all right, and when I explained my problem, he mentioned he was a physical therapist who might be able to help. Initially skeptical, thinking he was just hitting on me, he gave me his business card and suggested we could go to the first aid tent, where EMTs were present, and he could provide treatment. Molly explained. After about 30 minutes, my back felt much better, which allowed me to finish the tournament. His office is located south of Tampa, and since then I have been meeting with him regularly to prevent back problems. Our relationship has always been strictly professional. There has never been anything like intimacy between us. I enjoyed his company, but we never kissed or hugged. Everything changed after your heart attack, Brad. I was depressed emotionally and physically when you were so close to death. I couldn't imagine life without you. Our physical relationship has always been satisfying. Even when we're over 50, it feels like we're still on our honeymoon. You set high standards for our weekly intimacy, but now it's postponed until you come to your senses. During a physical therapy session, he noticed how tense my muscles were and suggested that they needed attention. I told him about your condition and how much I missed our closeness. He walked away, took out a booklet called Intimacy and Physical Therapy from a drawer, and explained that what I was experiencing was not unusual, especially for active couples. He suggested that I take the booklet home, read it, and decide if I wanted to explore this form of discharge. The booklet described the various stages of the work, starting with simple holding and hugging, moving on to light kisses, caresses, and so on. The chapter that intrigued me the most was about how a therapist helps a client reach a climax. In the following chapters, the possibility of communication between the therapist and the patient was discussed, but I was not interested in this, so I did not read further. At the next appointment, I asked him to use his experience to help me achieve my goal. He agreed, but it wasn't a hasty meeting. We spent an hour with dim lights, soft music, hugging and kissing, before something more intimate happened. His understanding of the female body delighted me. After that, we lay together like long-lost lovers, dozing and hugging each other. It started a few months ago, when you were still in the hospital. I know you probably don't want to hear this, Brad, but you said you wanted to know everything. I cried all the way to my car. I didn't like him. He was just experienced. I cried because I wanted you to be the one to give me this pleasure, like before. Over the next few weeks, we moved on to the immediate vicinity. He wasn't as skilled and loving as you are, and I told him so. He said it wasn't a competition for my affection, but rather keeping me active so that I could come back to you with new desires. He understood that I was with him only until you got better. He assured me that he would be happy to step aside as soon as you returned. It was just a temporary measure, and he made me sign the protocol after each session, calling it treatment. Brad, this was supposed to be temporary until you get better. I didn't want to lose the passion that we had. I don't want to become one of those wives who lose interest in intimacy. I want to continue to enjoy the time we spent together. I apologize to you, and I am ready to answer any questions you may have. Brad already had a list of questions prepared, but now he had 1 or 2 million more. First of all, Molly, who is this guy? I don't think I need to tell you his name because this embarrassment falls on me, not on him. Okay, Molly, I think we're done here. I have just enough time to get to the lawyer's office and start processing the documents. When he got up to leave, she jumped up and pleaded, "This is Eric Adams from Bradenton, Florida." "Thank you, Molly, but I'm not here to discuss every detail with you. If so, I'm leaving." "Did he use protection when he slept with you?" "Brad, you know I don't like that kind of expression. And I don't like that you're cheating on me. So answer the question." She lowered her eyes and confessed, "No, because he assured me that he was clean and took great care of hygiene. If I could have intimacy with you in the future but would not satisfy you, would you plan to continue receiving treatment from your boyfriend?" "I've thought about it, but I haven't decided. I think there was such an opportunity. I didn't plan on doing anything other than stopping it when we could make love again." "Molly, you once said that you wanted to be sexually minded like Ferrari. Have you thought about how your Ferrari might end up being kicked out of a nice garage and left in a dark alley if you keep sleeping with it?" "No, because no one knew what I was doing. We were very careful. I wanted to answer you the same way I did last year without all the mess I made." "How many people know that you're cheating on me?" "There was no deception. I've always respected you, and I've been looking forward to you coming back to our bed." "That's bullshit. When a married woman sleeps with someone other than her husband, she commits the greatest betrayal. Cuckolding is just a word for the most offensive disrespect you can show your husband. No real man will voluntarily accept this label because it humiliates just me and Eric." "Then what were you discussing with Carrie?" Another lie about to be exposed. "Ah, yes, Carrie and I talked extensively before I proceeded with that more intimate treatment. She thought it was a good idea and believed you wouldn't object. She reminded me that I have full control over my own body and should make decisions accordingly. She supported my choice. Later, she called to say her brothers also thought it would benefit us in the long run. So now the cheering squad for this arrangement has grown from just you and Eric to our 3 kids. That's 5. Did Jonathan and Carrie inform their spouses?" "Probably, so now it's 7. Molly could only shrug at his remark. "Can I share an analogy I read in a booklet? It's about an NFL player. He was the star running back until he got injured, not season-ending, but he'll miss 4 games. The backup comes in and performs well, but when the star player is ready, he resumes his position. The star doesn't resent the backup for filling in. It's part of the game. I think there are similarities here." Interesting story. The key difference is that in the NFL, contracts allow for substitutions due to injury or performance. The team can also release players at any time. Our agreement, on the other hand, explicitly forbids substitutions under any circumstances. That's all I have for questions today. I'm incredibly tired. Maybe it's just utter disappointment with how my life is unraveling. This isn't over. We need to talk more. I just don't have the strength right now to fully comprehend what the future holds." Molly hurried to him, tears streaming down her face, as she uttered, "I'm deeply sorry about all of this. I promise to make things right between us. I love you so much." To underscore her sincerity, she wrapped her arms around his neck and attempted to kiss him. "Get your disgusting, infected lips away from me. You need to get an STD test before you come near me again. The sooner the better." "Oh, Brad, I can't do that. I know everyone at the health center. It would be too embarrassing to go there and ask for a test. More embarrassing than you sleeping with someone else and telling our kids about my shortcomings? Spare me your concern for your reputation. I'm the one who's been humiliated here. I need some fresh air. This place stinks. I'm going outside. Leave me alone, Molly. As Brad walked out to the backyard, Molly sat sobbing at the table. Taking advantage of the warm fall morning, Brad settled into the hammock in the shade for a much-needed nap. His conversation with Molly had been enlightening, but unsettling. He wondered, what else didn't he know? After a less than restful nap, which still beat talking about Molly's leisure activities, Brad climbed out of the hammock and headed indoors for a glass of water. Though he craved a good lager in the afternoon, that was off limits. As he made his way to the bathroom, little did Brad know that Molly had just finished showering and was busy drying off. Standing in the middle of the bathroom and vigorously drying her hair with a towel, Molly did not notice Brad enter. Brad froze in his tracks at the sight of his wife, unclothed for the first time in weeks. He instantly recognized her as the most beautiful woman he had ever beheld, not just loved. A smile unconsciously spread across his face at the sight of her wonderful body. Just as Molly moved the towel from her face, she caught sight of Brad's smile. Their eyes locked and lingered on each other. Everything changed when Brad saw it. His breath caught in his throat as he focused his gaze. Here they are, traces of love on her. What the hell? Molly panicked when he saw the traces of love left by Eric in the heat of passion. Then Brad noticed an interesting detail. It looks like your friend shaved off all the hair there. He's really trying his best. I don't like that derogatory term, she replied firmly. And I despise the fact that some jerk is sleeping with my wife. Brad, let me explain. It seems to be the first thing all scammers say when they get caught. Molly, he's marking you. He makes it clear to me that you belong to him, not to me. Now you're his and I'm in second place. How could you do this to me? How? Why? Brad, don't you understand? It's all because of you. For many years you've been giving me pleasure several times a week. I'm like a racehorse that needs to keep running. The only reason I slept with Eric was because I couldn't be with you. Eric knows that. We are not lovers. He just supports me so that I can be the wife you are used to. I'm doing this for you, for us, so that we can go back to the way things were before. Every day when I look at you, I want to throw you on the bed. I need you, but I can't, because it will stop your heart. I want us to live together for the next 50 years. For this to happen, I have to do the hardest thing I've ever done, deny myself intimacy with you. Being close to Eric doesn't mean anything to me. It's just a physical release, like going to the training field to practice my punches. Brad chose to remain silent, preferring to listen for any crucial details that could help him understand why his beloved wife had betrayed him. He wasn't in the mood for arguments. He lacked the strength and inclination to engage in yelling matches. Both his physical heart and the core of his being had endured significant trauma over the past few days, and he needed time to recuperate, a sanctuary free from the storm of drama. I'm going to relax in the bedroom for a while. Please just leave me alone. His relaxation was short-lived as his phone rang, displaying an incoming call from his daughter. Hello, Dad. I'm relieved you didn't have to stay long in the hospital. Was it just a minor issue with your heart? No, sweetheart, it was much worse. I discovered that your mom has been unfaithful to me. It was a shocking and infuriating revelation, enough to trigger an anxiety attack. I'm at a crossroads now, trying to figure out what to do. Father, please don't worry. Forget about it and move forward. Mom loves you. And her relationship with the therapist was insignificant. She was struggling while you were in the hospital and needed an outlet to avoid further stress. Didn't you notice how much more relaxed she was while caring for you these past 4 months? It was beneficial for both of you that she could have that release. My friends and I talked about this and unanimously agreed she did what was best for both of you. The most important thing is that she's helping you recover and your love for each other has grown stronger. Since she doesn't dwell on your heart attack, you shouldn't dwell on her need for that aspect of her treatment. Besides, it's her body, and she can do what she wants with it. We saw it almost like a polyamorous relationship, except without your consent. Mom and Eric had an honest relationship where they understood each other's needs. It was clear that once you were fully recovered, Eric would step aside as they planned. This arrangement didn't diminish your relationship. You simply weren't ready for it to end. When you're ready, Eric will leave with no harm done to your relationship. Carrie, I value your friend's advice to move on, but after 6 semesters studying psychology without a degree, I find it presumptuous for you to advise a 51-year-old heart attack survivor dealing with a cheating spouse. What you're saying sounds like empty words to me. After that, Brad decided that he did not want to continue the conversation with his daughter. Perhaps they could come back to this conversation in a week or two. He hung up the phone. Interrupting his sleep, he called his son Jonathan to discuss work issues, which he could not do in front of Molly. Towards the end of their conversation, he cautiously asked Jonathan, "Did you know that your mother started seeing her physical therapist after my heart attack?" "No, this is news to me. I knew that she regularly visits a therapist, but I had no idea about any relationship between them. When did it start, and what do you plan to do about it? Who is this man, and how did you know, Dad?" "No, I just happened to hear your mom and Carrie talking about it. Your mom mentioned that Carrie told you and Matthew, and that you didn't mind." "That's absolutely not true," Jonathan almost shouted. "I would remember such a conversation and would immediately turn to my sister if she said something like that. I know she has questionable friends, but I didn't think she was involved in this kind of thing. I think I need to have a serious talk with her husband, Tim." "I'm sorry you had to find out about it this way, Dad. It must be a shock. Just tell me what you need and I'll do everything in my power to help." "Thank you, son. I appreciate it. Have you talked to Matthew recently? Does he know anything about it?" "Last night we talked about your stay in the hospital, but nothing like that was mentioned. We thought it was just a health problem. No one mentioned anything else. Could you please call Matthew and tell him I'm running out of energy to sort out all this mess today? And don't tell Carrie or your mother that you know the real reason for my last stay in the hospital. I want to see what other lies they can come up with and who it comes from." Jonathan advised, "I understand this is tough for you, but you need to control your anger and stay calm. Let things unfold naturally. You've always been the type to make quick decisions, but it's time to change that. Take it easy. Take your time to make a thoughtful decision, not a hasty one. Take care of yourself. Okay?" Both men felt disappointed about what had transpired and vowed to keep in touch. He knew he couldn't relax enough to take a nap now, so he went to the family room. There he discovered a note that read, "Heading to get tested for STDs. I don't want to do this, but I'll do anything you ask if it means I can stay married to you. Lots of love, Molly." He lounged on the sofa, contemplating Jonathan's advice about easing up to maintain his heart health. One of his simple pleasures was enjoying a fine cigar out on the rear patio. Molly detested even a hint of smoke wafting into the house whenever he slipped in and out for another drink. His thought was clear. She's doing her thing, I'll do mine. With that resolve, he unearthed his humidor, untouched for 5 months. His selection was a Liga Privada No. 9, a hefty 7-inch cigar promising an hour of enjoyment. As he settled back on the couch, he indulged in a smoke that topped Molly's strict "thou shalt not" list. Sure, smoking was detrimental to health, but so was discovering your wife in someone else's arms. A finger of his cherished single malt scotch wouldn't hurt either. He flicked on Fox Sports Center and tuned out the chaos. 65 peaceful minutes passed, his cigar stub smoldering in the ashtray as Molly walked through the door. "What the hell?" Her initial reaction was to the rich scent of one of mankind's finest smokes. "Brad, you shouldn't be smoking." "Yeah, and you shouldn't be with some jerk. This is going to ruin the drapes and the carpet. The smell won't come out. Everything's ruined. We'll have to tear it all out and start over." He heartlessly remarked, "You know, Molly, there's real symbolism here. Smoke stains the carpet, so we toss it out. You wrecked our marriage, so maybe we should toss that out too?" Knowing she would face rejection, Molly couldn't bring herself to run and embrace her husband. His argument held weight, and she had no one to blame but herself. Speechless against his onslaught, she walked over to the couch and sat down, not beside him, but on the same couch. That was as close as he would allow her. Attempting to change the battleground, she ventured, "We've been invited to the Simpsons tonight for wine and dessert. Sharon just finished remodeling her kitchen and wants us to see it. I know it's not your favorite thing, but could we leave the house for an hour or so and escape from this awful tension I've caused? Please." "All right." An hour away from her husband is about all I can handle. "It'll be good to get out of this house for a bit," he conceded. "I'm not fond of Gary either, but the Kellys and the Sullivans will be there, so you won't be alone with him." Their dinner was calm until Brad brought up Molly's visit to the health clinic. Molly admitted, "It was embarrassing. I knew all 3 nurses there. They handled it professionally and didn't judge me. At least, not openly. The hardest part was having to list who I've been sexually active with in the past 90 days. My hand was shaking so much when I wrote down Eric's name instead of yours, Brad. I feel so ashamed. I can now understand a tiny fraction of what you're going through." She struggled to say the last sentence. Brad remained silent. Words were unnecessary. Molly felt relieved stepping into Gary and Sharon's home. Brad managed a faint smile and headed to the kitchen to admire it aloud. Gary led Brad to the family room where Paul and Sam were deep in conversation about the upcoming Buccaneers game. The 3 men were already enjoying Gary's selection of scotch, sharing laughs and banter. Gary offered Brad a drink, to which Brad politely declined, saying, "Sorry, I need to stay away from that for a few more months. Thanks, though." "I forgot about that, Brad. How's the rehab going?" Gary inquired. "Rehab takes time and effort, slowing me down more than I'd like," Brad replied. Gary smiled at the other 2 men and remarked, "It's a pity that there are things you want but can't get. By the way, I've heard that you let your gorgeous wife have fun with other men because of your weak heart. I'd like to add my name to the list of guys she's allowed to be with. I would really like her company." When Gary said that, Brad's expression hardened. His eyes lit up with anger at this insensitive guy. How dare he talk to him like that? Noticing the change in the atmosphere, Gary quickly added with a smile, "I was just joking, making fun of you. I didn't mean to disrespect you or Molly." He held out his hand and said, "No offense." Brad's face softened slightly, but his heart and anger remained in place. He took a step towards Gary, holding out his right hand. Gary grinned, unaware of Brad's powerful left-handed punch aimed directly at him. Gary screamed in pain when the blow hit the target, and Brad hit him with his elbow. Brad wanted Gary to remember that pain every time he thought about Brad Carson or his wife. Gary spun around and crashed into the coffee table, smashing glasses and scattering drinks and snacks everywhere. 3 women burst into the room, and Sharon asked, "What happened?" Brad stared straight at Molly and grinned. "Gary heard that you slept with other men because I couldn't satisfy you. He wanted you to be added to the list of your lovers. I gave him my answer." Molly turned pale. "Oh no," was all she could say after repeating it several times. She turned to Sharon and exclaimed, "You shouldn't have told anyone, nobody. You shouldn't have told anyone." When Molly turned to Brad, he had already disappeared. She didn't even hear the door slam because of Gary's screams. Molly only saw Brad's taillights when she ran outside to find him. "Damn, he's gone," was her first thought. Then she trembled, realizing the deeper implication of the words, "He's gone." Is he gone forever? Brad practiced breathing exercises to deal with stress, and they began to calm him down as he drove up to the house. His therapist advised him to go to his happy place at such moments, and he hoped that this day would come. His happy place was the fortress. He quickly packed up several changes of clothes, a laptop, and a first aid kit, with medicines before returning to his car. The fortress is located in a newly developed light industrial area on the east side of Interstate 75, strategically positioned away from potential hurricane storm surges. Marketed as Executive Man Caves, this facility boasts intimidating perimeter fencing and a robust electronic entry system. The long, single-story, windowless concrete buildings each feature roll-up garage doors and steel-plated entrances for the 6 individual units. Using his remote control, Brad opened the roll-up door to enter the spacious interior. Brad's unit spanned 1,500 square feet and featured a concrete floor, a small bedroom, a bathroom with a shower, and a kitchenette. The main area was furnished with sofas, chairs, and tables arranged around a 72 wall-mounted television. Concrete walls were adorned with pennants, posters, and flags celebrating the University of Florida Gators and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Notably, the posters of partially clad women behind football-themed displays were swapped out depending on the company present. In his modern man cave, his attention centered on a 1999 Mercedes SL 500 convertible, shining silver, an R129 two-seat roadster. Parked next to his Lexus, the car he used to escape from Molly, it was his pride and joy. Thinking of Molly, he glanced at his buzzing phone, flooded with messages over the last half hour. For the first time in days, he smiled at the memories of their time together. Though time had changed things. An engineer by profession, his training and instincts led him to a whiteboard on the wall, now repurposed for tracking bets and scores on sports events. Wiping away old scores from before his heart attack, he reflected on how long ago it seemed when he was happily married. Yet, it had only been 3 days. He decided to name the board Molly numbers with columns like "I'm sorry," "I love you," "Please forgive me," "I'll do whatever it takes," and blah, blah, blah. The final column was, "How many know?" Amused, he noted how Molly's messages echoed phrases straight from the cheater's book of excuses. He mused, the more people cheat, the more cliched it all becomes. Starting to tally the phrases used since he found out about her infidelity, he began with tonight's messages. "I'm sorry" was 9. "I love you" was 15. "Please forgive me." 8. "Whatever it takes" 12. And blah, blah, blah 1. The column titled, "How many know?" started with a count of 2, Eric and Molly. Adding the next 3 children and their spouses increased it to 7. 3 of Carrie's friends and hospital nurses brought the total to 13. Finally, including the 3 couples from that night brought the total he knew to 19. How many more were there? He appreciated Molly's discretion despite her involvement with someone he sarcastically called the world's greatest lover. Yeah, right. Pandora, play Frank Sinatra. This was the music he liked as he tidied up and took his evening medication. A resilient man, living life on his terms despite enduring several painful relationships. He emerged victorious. That would now shape his future. The next morning he woke up refreshed and serene. Serene wasn't a word that described his cell phone, though. Luckily, the whiteboard made it easy to update and replace the new numbers. As he savored his morning coffee, a knock suddenly echoed at his door. Puzzled, he wondered how she'd managed to bypass the gate. Peering through the peephole, all he could see was the brim of a policeman's hat. Opening the door, he was met by a young policeman and a female lieutenant. "Are you Brad Carson?" "Yes, ma'am. I am." "May we come in, Mr. Carson?" Brad swung the door wide and welcomed the officers inside. The woman officer appeared tall and blonde, her face naturally attractive without makeup. They glanced around his man cave briefly. "I'm Lieutenant Pauls, and this is Officer Sullivan. Last night your wife contacted the station to issue a silver alert for you. She feared you might have suffered another heart attack while driving and couldn't make it home. We don't issue amber or silver alerts without investigation. After speaking with her, we suspected you might be here. So, Mr. Carson, how are you feeling? Do you need any medical assistance?" Brad chuckled softly. "I'm dealing with heartbreak, not a heart attack." My wife was having an affair while I was recovering from my heart attack 4 months ago. I just needed some time away from home to ease my stress. But thank you for checking on me. Lieutenant Pauls reassured him, saying, "No problem, just doing our job." As she turned to leave, she exclaimed, "Oh my gosh, is that a roadster? I absolutely adore that car. What year is it?" "It's a 1999 with only 92,000 miles on it." "It's stunning. The car isn't even halfway through its life. Can I sit in it?" Brad noticed her graceful athleticism as she slid into the car. Her eyes sparkled and her smile radiated happiness as she gripped the wheel. After running her hand over the dashboard, she sighed and exited the Mercedes. "Thank you for letting me touch your car. That was enjoyable," she said, stepping directly in front of him. She handed him her card and added, "Call me if you need anything. I'm glad you're okay." From her demeanor, Brad sensed he would need that card very soon. He texted Molly, "You didn't tell me what you were doing for 4 months. Why should I tell you what I'm doing for one night?" He scheduled an appointment with his attorney for mid-morning, allowing time to rectify matters at the bank and investment firms afterward. Brad remained composed as he recounted his troubles to his lawyer, Joe Smith, a longtime friend and golf buddy. After bearing his emotional wounds, Brad inquired, "Will getting a divorce hurt my finances as much as it hurts my heart?" Joe replied with a knowing grin, "Luckily, the legal advice you've received over the past 15 years will come in handy." He continued, "Back when you had that serious car accident, we took steps to protect your assets. Everything except your house was placed into a trust. We were concerned that if anything happened to you as the sole shareholder, the company could face significant tax liabilities. I even had Molly sign a document relinquishing any claims to your company in favor of the trust. Now, with the divorce looming, we'll need to make adjustments to the trust. You'll remain the trustee, but we'll revise the beneficiary from Molly to you. Her name won't be mentioned in the trust anymore. Your son, Jonathan, will be appointed as co-trustee, with authority vested only after your passing. Next, we will revise your will to reflect your desired distribution of trust assets. As you mentioned, it will be divided as follows: 1/3 to Jonathan, 1/3 to Matthew, and 1/3 to the trust for Carrie's children until they reach 25 years old, with education expenses covered from age 18 onward. Regarding Molly, your house is not included in the trust, and I'm unsure how you wish to handle that. It's likely you'll need to provide some marital support to Molly for a few years. What are your thoughts on this?" Brad responded, "I've already taken care of the house. I've been maxing out a self-directed IRA every year for her retirement. How much do you anticipate I'll need to pay in marital support?" "I'm not sure. That will depend on Molly and the judge. Now, we need to engage in some strategic planning. I assume you'll begin closing and transferring checking, savings, and credit cards today. Additionally, we must draft and execute the updated trust and will documents before you file for divorce. It's crucial to follow these steps in the correct sequence to facilitate a smooth settlement process. Fortunately, setting up the trust several years ago has put you in a strong financial position. I'm sorry your marriage didn't work out as planned." After wrapping up his responsibilities with closings and transfers, he swung by the grocery store to stock up on essentials for his personal retreat, his man cave. Now back home, he decided to raise the roll-up garage door to let the crisp fall air refresh the space. He was eagerly anticipating the upcoming weekend. The fortress, with its 6 buildings, was always bustling with lively tailgate parties. Gas grills were wheeled out onto driveways. Water tanks were filled with ice and beer. Almost every man cave owner would proudly display their school flags on Saturdays and NFL flags on Sundays. The SEC rivalry games were particularly spirited, filled with loyal and jovial fans. Amidst his life's changes, he knew he wouldn't feel alone. He looked forward to spending more time with his eye-catching SL500. As he glanced at his buzzing cell phone, he noticed numerous texts and missed calls. However, most of the messages revolved around the same few topics: listed on his whiteboard, none of which seemed urgent to address. One text stood out. It was from Carrie, pleading for him to call her. At Carrie's insistence, he dialed her number, secretly hoping it would go to voicemail. No such luck. Carrie picked up, greeting him with a soft, "Hello, Daddy." After exchanging pleasantries, Carrie launched into her plea. "Dad, you really need to call Mom. She's a wreck, full of grief, anger, and regret. She's terrified that something will happen to you. Can you please call her?" Brad sighed inwardly, thinking to himself, "Another lecture." He replied to Carrie, "Okay, what should I say?" "Molly, I'm sorry you were worried about me. You weren't worried enough to stay away from that guy for 4 months. Why worry now that I'm recovering?" "Is that what you want me to say, Carrie?" "Come on, Dad," Carrie urged. "She made a mistake. Can't you forgive her and reconcile? So she had a fling. That's no reason to hold a grudge." Brad shook his head, his voice tinged with bitterness. Forgive a deliberate affair? She didn't just slip up. It was over 40 times at his office or his place. That's not a spontaneous mistake. She drove an hour just to be with him. It's premeditated disrespect, complete disregard for me. Why did you lie to your brothers and start this whole mess? How could you do this to your father? I'm deeply disappointed in you. You've betrayed me when I need support the most. The doctor warned me about stress. Just talking to you puts me on edge. With a click, the call ended abruptly. Carrie wondered if it was just for now or forever. Tears welled up as she whispered to herself, "Pandora, play Frank Sinatra." Meanwhile, Brad occupied himself for the next few hours cleaning and polishing his SL500 in the solitude of his man cave, finding solace in the task and the thoughts it brought. On Saturday, Brad found exactly what he needed to unwind. He invited a couple of his friends over to his apartment at the Fortress for the Gator football game, grilling steaks and chilling beer. True to form, all 5 guys showed up. Brad was footing the bill, after all. Other residents stopped by to chat with Brad and his buddies, turning the gathering into a lively social affair. Many of them were aware of Brad's recent heart attack and were delighted to see him up and about. After 6 hours of conversation, laughter, and cheering, Brad was exhausted. While his friends headed out for dinner, Brad opted to excuse himself, stretched out alone on the couch for the post-game show, and promptly fell asleep. 3 hours later, he woke up and went to bed. The next day, Brad didn't extend invitations for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers football game. Instead, he spent the day visiting neighboring units and enjoying their hospitality. Like Saturday, he had to be mindful of what he ate and drank, or rather, what he avoided. Despite this, it was a pleasant day. Brad realized that his social life wouldn't suffer too much with his wife no longer in the picture. By the end of the day, he found it surprising that he didn't miss Molly at all. During their time together at a gathering, she would fret over the food, drinks, her attire, who she talked to, and the whereabouts of Brad. Her concerns often drained the enjoyment from what should have been a pleasant afternoon of camaraderie and good times. Monday marked a significant moment as he sat down with Joe Smith to finalize the legal paperwork for their divorce. It was a somber occasion for him, grappling with the betrayal by the woman he had loved for so long. It was time to move on. Instead of responding to any of Molly's numerous texts, emails, or phone calls, Brad sent her a text. "Can we meet at the house on Tuesday at 1 p.m.? Brad." Almost instantly, Molly replied, "Of course, I've missed you so much. It'll be wonderful to see you again. Can you come at noon so we can have lunch?" "Sorry, I can't make it then. If you change your mind, Brad, you can come by our house anytime that day." Despite Brad's cryptic text, Molly hoped it marked the beginning of their reconciliation. She pondered her attire, not provocative or revealing, but enticing, inviting him into her and their marital bed. Not just for physical intimacy, but for the closeness of being together. Bringing Brad back into their home would require extensive negotiation and compromise. She believed they both needed to give and respect each other's emotions. Despite Brad's recent behavior, she knew he still loved her, and wanted her as his wife. At 1:01 p.m. on Tuesday, Brad rang the doorbell. Molly, who had been waiting inside since 12:45, eagerly opened the door. She tried to embrace him, but he politely sidestepped her and headed to the family room. She placed a letter from the health department, confirming she was free of any sexually transmitted diseases, on the table for Brad to see. "I know it's a small consolation, but I wanted you to know I am clean." Her comment was met with a shrug of his shoulders and a dull look in his eyes, as if to say, "So what?" Molly began the difficult conversation with questions about Brad's health. She was surprised when he mentioned the tailgate parties he attended over the weekend. "I hope you didn't overexert yourself, Brad. You need to be careful with your heart." Brad thought, "I had a heart attack, then she broke my heart. Now she says to be careful with my heart. What a hypocrite." After discussing their kids' and new grandkids' activities, Molly said, "Carrie has been a mess since you talked to her. She was just looking out for both of us because she loves us. She thought my taking that therapy was appropriate." Well, her approval was way beyond what I considered acceptable. Plus her disgusting advice about sleeping with some jerk. Both boys thought your adulterous escapade was entirely wrong. Wrong in so many ways. I wonder how many people now see me as the town's cuckolded wimp. What stories are being told at the bars? Filthy gossip spread by my daughter. I can't believe she would do that to me. I'm really sorry you found out about this and how the story spread. We tried very hard to be discreet so no one would know or even suspect we were together. Brad growled. "So if I hadn't found out about your cheating on the phone, this jerk would still be with you?" "I don't know, Brad. I haven't decided yet. My heart has always been with you, but my body wanted intimacy and I needed it badly. I was going crazy. It was what my body needed. You weren't around and I was looking for some kind of release. I knew you wouldn't approve. But I had to make a decision based on my needs, not your opinion. My body is my choice. I'm really sorry that you're angry, but I made this decision hoping that you'd never find out. I did it for both of us, for our lives. I wanted to be ready for the moment when you come to bed and we have this. I wanted to be ready for you. You're the one I really love. I have always loved and always will love. Eric is just a substitute, no different from an adult toy. What you found out created a stressful situation between us. I'm glad we were careful. I never wanted to embarrass you in public. It was never my intention. Your idea of prudence and mine are different. According to my calculations, 19 people know the whole story. You might as well tell it on the evening news. How can this be? This can't be happening. Staring at Molly, Brad recounted everyone on his tally on the whiteboard. Her face darkened as she looked down at the floor. This wasn't going to help her bargaining position. I'm sorry, Brad. So sorry. Sorry for so many things. I'm sure you are. By my count, that's the 57th time since I left the house that you've said or texted that to me. Where's that gotten us? I guess I've said that a lot because I truly am sorry. I'll try not to say that word so often. Molly, you've also said you'd do anything to get us back together, 46 times. So, tell me your plan for getting us back together. My main goal, Brad, is to grow old with you as the only and main man in my life. You're a wonderful man, a great father, and I want us to enjoy our grandchildren together. Knowing you, you've researched what our options are. I've tried to put together several options for your approval. The option you want to hear is my kicking Eric out of my life and never seeing him again. Under normal circumstances, that would be the best option for reconciliation. I'm willing to give you that promise, but I don't realistically feel I can remain faithful to you while you are incapacitated. It's hard for me to say this, but I want to be honest with you. As soon as you get permission to be intimate, I can guarantee you I'll be faithful to you. Eric and all other men are no longer attractive to me. As I mentioned, Eric is just a temporary replacement for the best lover in my life, you. I like being intimate with you, but you're not available right now. I'm sure in a few months you'll be ready for what happened between us. In the meantime, I suggest we gradually abandon Eric. I need to practice intimacy, twice a week. This is only 2 hours out of 168 hours per week, or 1.1% of the total length of the week. This is a small part of the big picture. The remaining 98.9% of the week, I am your loving and grateful wife. You won't even notice that I was with Eric, just like you haven't noticed for the last 4 months. You were fine then, weren't you? See, it's not that hard. When you get better and become fully functional, the dynamics will change. When you can have intimacy once a week, I'll shorten the day with Eric. When we can make love twice a week, there will be no need for Eric. You will be my main and only man again. My last and least preferred option for us is to get divorced. This is my least favorite option. I will miss you very much and the way you treat me both as a wife and as a lover. Another downside is the financial aspect of a divorce. You've worked incredibly hard and made many sacrifices for me and the kids. It would be a shame if I ended up taking half of your company. I would need to do that to maintain my lifestyle. I'd keep my dream home, and you would have to move out. Even though I'd have the house, you could visit and be intimate with me whenever you want. Additionally, I'm sure you'd have to pay some form of spousal support each month. The lawyers would figure that out. The main point is that I love you and want to stay together. I believe we can resolve this by both of us compromising a little to make each other happy. Brad, I'm sure you'll want to make some changes, and I'm willing to adjust to make our marriage work. You can think this over and we can discuss it now. We can take our time because this is important to both of us. As soon as she finished speaking, Brad replied, "So that's what you mean by saying, I will do everything to make our marriage happen. I think you're going to keep sleeping with this guy until you decide to stop." Molly stated emphatically, "I can't stand that rude word. It's rude, vulgar, and beneath your dignity to say that." Almost screaming, Brad retorted, "He is who he is. He slept with the mother of my children. It makes him who he is. So spare me your moral outrage at my statements, you hypocrite. How can you judge my words when we're discussing with you the consequences of this jerk's actions?" Molly paled at his harsh remarks. He was right, and she knew it, but she couldn't admit it to him. "I can say that you have received legal advice. Since I discussed this with Joe, who we have been working with for many years, you had to go somewhere else. Yes, Eric's brother is a lawyer, and he gave advice on how divorces are usually handled. He was very helpful. Isn't it wonderful? You get free physical therapy, and now you get free legal work. You are really becoming a corrupt person. Did that sneaky lawyer take photos while you were together, so that you could remember your special moments when I regain my self-respect? Don't say that, Brad. I'm trying to get us back together. Please, let's calmly try to settle everything. Just for discussion, could you share your thoughts on our reconciliation? This is not the kind of nonsense you're going to put me through. I do not know how much you humiliated yourself to draw up this legal opinion, but in my opinion, he got a better deal. Okay, Molly, I think you need a history lesson. Do you remember when I was in the car accident 3 years ago? Immediately after that, Joe offered to transfer all my possessions, except for the house, to a trust fund. I was the trustee, and you were listed as the beneficiary. Well, the situation has changed. Now I am both a trustee and a beneficiary. You are not listed anywhere in the trust. This is quite appropriate, since I have lost all confidence in you. Now I have full control of the trust, and from your position, it is impregnable. I also revised my will to clarify how I want the trust to be distributed. 1/3 to Jonathan, 1/3 to Matthew, and 1/3 to Carrie's children when they turn 25 with Jonathan as executor. Since I no longer recognize the person you have become, you are no longer listed in my will. The blood drained from her face and her hands became sticky. She was speechless. Let's discuss your ideal home. It was a house I neither needed nor desired, but you certainly did. 2 years ago, you pressured me relentlessly to buy a Lamborghini convertible, even resorting to withholding intimacy as a form of punishment. Remember? I absolutely did not want to purchase an expensive Lamborghini for you. especially just to impress your friends. While your dream house was fully paid for, I arranged to refinance it. Together, we signed a $900,000 mortgage on a $200,000 property. You took $450,000 for yourself, buying a Lamborghini, house artwork, and spending a month in Tuscany with your friends. Which brings me to a new question. It seems you couldn't even wait 2 weeks after my heart attack to start a relationship with someone else. So the question now is, how many Italians did you sleep with while you were in Tuscany? This revelation stunned Molly speechless. She couldn't muster a response, just hung her head in shame. We had to part with the Lamborghini because you weren't comfortable driving such a high-performance car. Repairing dents on a Lamborghini is far costlier than on my Lexus. Between frequent expensive repairs, higher insurance premiums, and speeding tickets, I eventually persuaded you to exchange it for a Mercedes sedan, despite losing over $100,000 in the process. You still own the artwork in the house, which is yours. I have no interest in it. By the way, you never did tell me the cost of renting a villa in Tuscany for a month. As for the house refinance, your share is now in your driveway and on the walls, but you still owe $450,000. I used my $450,000 to purchase a unit at the Fortress and invested the remainder, which has nearly doubled in value today. This portion is also not accessible to your lawyer. You can keep the house and continue living in it as long as you keep up with the payments. Good luck with that. So, if you want to own the whole house, not just half, I'm ready to give you my half after signing these documents within a week. However, you will need to pay the remaining $450,000 in mortgage payments. There will be no spousal support or alimony from me. I am disabled, unable to work, and my doctor does not have a clear prognosis regarding my ability to return to work. My disability insurance is my only source of income. Unfortunately, financially, I'm in a worse position now than when we got married. No matter how satisfying your romance with this man was, I'm sure this breakup will leave a lasting impression. I'm going to clear the house right now, Molly. Divorce papers will follow soon. Read this carefully. Contact a lawyer. Pay in cash and refrain from personal services. Just remember, the more often you get into relationships with young men, the less valuable it is to them or other people. Brad left behind the divorce papers in the envelope, strode purposefully to the door, then paused and said, I survived a near-fatal heart attack. The pain and trauma were unbearable, but each day I'm improving. Yet nothing compares to the pain of you breaking my heart, a wound I may never heal from, but I'll damn well try. Walking to his car, he reflected. What a difference a week makes. It feels like ages ago, yet only 8 days have turned my whole family upside down. Court-ordered mediation was Molly's final attempt at reconciliation. Brad used these sessions to rid himself of bitterness and find peace within. He dreaded the thought of another heart attack. Too much lay ahead. The best part of his life awaited. He struggled to envision ever seeing Molly again. Brad and Carrie never fully reconciled. Brad left his will unchanged, with no alterations to beneficiaries. Molly's ineffective lawyer attempted to challenge the trust, but he lacked knowledge of complex asset protection strategies. She sought advice from another reputable firm, which advised her that Brad's initial offer was likely the best she could hope for. The fact that he had taken these legal steps years before their divorce was evidence of his good faith at the time. Molly accepted Brad's offer for his share of the house's value and debt, then promptly sold the property. She now resides in a small apartment in a secure neighborhood. Brad hired movers to relocate his belongings from the house, placing most of them in storage or the Fortress. He planned to wait until after the divorce to secure a new apartment or smaller home. He began visiting the office for an hour or two each day, but declined any salary. Income from investments held solely in his name provided the necessary funds, though it wasn't classified as traditional income. While he was there, Laura Miller, the HR director, was called to his office. When they were taking his things out of his former home, he came across an interesting folder with documents. Inside, he found the monthly report of the health insurance company, as well as the brochure, Intimacy and Physical Therapist. The report stated that Eric Adams applied for medical insurance payments to his company's health insurer for Molly's treatment in the amount of $100 per day, allegedly for every working day for 5 months, totaling $2,000 per month. In fact, Brad's company was paying Eric's bills for communicating with his wife. Over the past few months, Brad has learned to adapt his approach. This time, instead of shouting, he laughed ominously. Molly spent no more than 8 days a month with Eric. It's time to deal with his actions. Laura was tasked with collecting and reviewing all Eric and Molly's medical bills for the past 5 months. Eric seems to have calculated that the influx of medical bills due to Brad's heart attack will exceed his bill of $100 per appointment. Laura was shocked by Eric's blatant health insurance fraud. Brad instructed her to ask a representative of the insurance company to carefully examine the documents. The representative was furious after reviewing the evidence. She explained that their procedure involves contacting Eric Adams first to substantiate their claims. If they are found to be fraudulent, he will have to reimburse $10,000 for 5 months of treatment. Failure to comply with this requirement may result in legal action and his suspension from participating in health insurance programs run by reputable companies. Brad instructed his lawyer, Joe Smith, to contact the Florida Medical Council about the brochure Intimacy and Psychotherapist, due to the fact that Eric Adams was close to Molly Carson more than 40 times. Following an investigation and interviews with Eric and Molly, Eric's license to practice physical therapy in Florida was revoked. Molly was deeply upset by the ordeal, having been required to provide detailed accounts of Eric's actions during each session. She felt uncomfortable as male board members seemed to leer at her while the women looked on disapprovingly. Brad pressured Joe to persuade the local district attorney to file fraud charges against Eric. The district attorney complied as a favor but did not pursue prosecution due to the relatively small amount of $10,000 involved. Nevertheless, anyone searching Eric Adams' name would find mention of the pending fraud charges. Brad also hired a company to check applications in other states, ensuring Eric would face consequences for his fraudulent behavior if he tried to practice physical therapy elsewhere. Meanwhile, due to Brad's disability and limited income, Molly had to return to work. However, her nursing license had been suspended because she hadn't maintained her continuing education hours. She found employment as a nurse's aide at a local retirement facility, a far cry from her previous affluent lifestyle. Her new job and reduced income meant she couldn't join her former best friends at the country club for afternoon cosmopolitans by the pool. Her divorced friends, devastated by her own divorce, began inviting her soon-to-be ex-husband over for drinks and dinner, adding to her challenges. Their sons hardly talked to her. Carrie and Molly accused each other of driving a wedge between Brad and the boys. Both women were unhappy with the small amount of property they received after Brad's divorce. Brad ridiculed Carrie's threat to limit his contact with his grandchildren. Faced with the humiliating investigation conducted by the medical board in connection with her affair with Eric, she stopped all communication with him. Brad and the kids are unaware of her current lover status, which is not easy given her night shift work. Brad asked Joe to convince the district attorney to charge Molly for selling herself, citing $100 in exchange for intimate services. Joe doubted that the charges would stand, but Brad didn't mind. He was satisfied that the police had searched her apartment. After the divorce, Brad himself became the subject of a police investigation. After Sunday's car ride with Lieutenant Pauls, now known as Shelley, the inspection began. Brad was used to being searched in his men's cave and sometimes handcuffed to the bed, which included searches with inappropriate behavior by Shelley. Now Brad is enjoying life to the fullest. His friends constantly introduce him to new potential partners, and after more than 30 years of thinking that Molly was his only love, he became convinced of the opposite. Now he is eagerly looking for a new, only woman,